Hello there, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of the My English Matters podcast. I'm your host, Azimah. Today, I'll be speaking to a guest all the way from London, and he's currently pursuing his PhD. So, the goal of this interview is to have our guest talk about life in the UK as a Malaysian, the joys and struggles of adapting to life in an English speaking country. So I'm confident that the listeners can learn a lot from his experience and perhaps gain valuable tips and insights from his stories about living abroad. It's going to be a great conversation, and I've got lots of questions for him. So without further ado, let's welcome Ata to the show. Welcome, Ata. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor, really.
Yeah, I'm honored to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. The weather is horrendous here right now, but yeah, we've been dealing with that for the last 3 or 4 years, or got used to it, I
Wow,
suppose.
amazing. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, your full name, and tell us what you are doing actually in London. What are you doing there?
All right. So, my full name is Ata Hanifee bin Zawawi. I'm currently a what we call it a scheme latihan academic Bumiputera fellow. Right. It's basically a
Mm.
scheme where local universities in Malaysia, send us off to different universities. Could be locally, could be internationally, to further our studies in doctoral studies in order for us to come
Mm.
back and serve the country, becoming academics and scholars in our own right. So currently, I'm doing a PhD in film adaptation. Now, that sounds really, really, I would say, different than most. But yeah, there it is again, PhD in film adaptation. So sorry, there's a bit of a guest coming in today. Would you like to say hello,
Wow,
Armin? Armin,
Armin.
come on.
Hello
Come. Yeah.
there.
Hello. This
Oh,
is
hello,
my
Armin.
son,
How are
Armin.
you?
Yeah,
Oh my
he's
God.
been here since he was 3 years old. You're now going to 5.
Mm-mm. Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
Right.
And I'm sure he
Yeah.
speaks really
Mommy,
wonderful
when
English
I
with
was three,
with an
I
accent.
grown out
Yeah.
into
There we go.
4.
Yeah, Armin, very good. Well,
Amazing.
I'll call you back later. Can you go, Mama? Oh. All right, sorry. There's a bit of an interruption
It's all
there,
right.
but yeah.
Okay, no worries. It's just a fun part of being a dad while studying and all of that.
Yeah,
So,
he does.
what's the name of your university?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. I'm currently basically I'm with the Queen Mary University of London, or
Mm-hmm.
QMUL.
Mm-mm.
It's a university based in exactly in East London,
Mm-mm.
the sort of like the borough of Mile End, is it? Yeah, it's Mile End. And yeah, it's actually quite more or less famous for medicine and law. However,
Mm.
unbeknownst to a lot of people, the film studies department is actually one of the stronger ones in the country, in the UK. So it's
Mm.
part of the reason why I chose, yeah, QMUL. Besides, obviously, it being in London means that I get to engage in the London film industry, the scene basically,
Ooh.
and it's been a wonderful experience, I suppose.
Just curious about is this your first time actually studying abroad?
Yeah, yeah. I would say, in that sense, this
Yeah.
is a great, would say, opportunity on my end. I've actually never
Yeah.
gone abroad for studying. I did my
Mm,
undergraduate at IIUM, right?
mm-mm.
And I did my master's and UM. So
Right.
when UM offered me to send me off to the UK to do my PhD, of course I had to take the opportunity, and yeah, here I am, and very, very grateful for this experience. Right?
Yeah, and it's 3 years on now, isn't it? Was it 2 years?
Mhm. Yeah,
2 years
this is
now.
my third year.
Third year.
I mean,
About
I'm going
3 years.
into my yeah, I'm going to go into my third year. But right now it's 2 years and a half, I suppose. And
Mm.
Alhamdulillah, progress has been good on my end, and I'm hoping to be done with the program in August. So hopefully
Wow.
to be back in the warm weather of Malaysia by August, hopefully.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what is it like being a student in the UK? Maybe you can tell us
Hmm.
the difference between being a student in Malaysia versus being in the UK.
Hmm.
And are there
Um,
many Malaysians at university? I wonder.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll just get to the question on what's it like being. But firstly,
Yeah.
yeah, being a former colony of the United Kingdom, I suppose Malaysia is one of the more, I would say, prominently featured countries, in this in the community, in the UK community. I mean, generally, there's a space called Bayswater in London. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically, they would call it a Kampung Melayu there. So, like, if they have this funny saying, like, if you go there and you randomly throw a stone over, you hit a Malaysian in the head, 5 times out of like seven, something like that. I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, that's something. Yeah,
Is that
you
true?
meet a lot of
Is that
Malaysians
true?
there,
Oh my
as
goodness.
they say. But Queen Mary
Okay.
University has a very active and thriving Malaysian society, and
Mm-hmm.
it's given me a lot of, again, would say, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of people that would say
Mm.
going through the same challenges, and I'm actually very, very happy for that. Uh, because now, because the segue to the question of what's it like
Yeah.
being a student in the UK.
Yeah.
I guess the key thing that I would always like to sort of like expose people to living abroad in general, and not necessarily saying the UK, is that it's definitely a challenge. Yeah, that's the
Mm.
main thing. It's absolutely a challenge, right? Not to say that there's nothing good about it. There's absolutely a lot of things that's good about it, but make no mistake that the challenges are always going to be there, especially when you're packing things up and relocating your life somewhere in a different part of the
Yeah.
world. All right, but for UK specifically, I think is that my main takeaway from it is that no matter
Mm.
how good your English is in Malaysia, I'd say it's a different beast trying to actually, sort of use your Malaysian English proficiency in the
Mm.
context of the UK English language environment. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole different challenge altogether, right? I think one of my best examples I always talk about is the fact that I
Mm.
had to make my basically I had to register myself to the GP, right, the general practitioner, or in any case a government doctor, right. I had to give them a
Mm.
call, and
Yeah.
I remember at the first instance is that um, I tried to tell them I wanted to register. They said something to me. I couldn't understand a single word they said. And I kept saying,
Mm.
sorry, pardon, sorry, pardon, sorry. And
Was
you
it
can
the
tell that
speed? Yeah. The speed
it's
or
not just
the
the
accent? What
speed.
was it?
It was a whole, it's so many different factors. It's the speed of their
Mm.
talking.
Mm.
It's this sort of like the way they speak, the different kind of words they use.
Yeah.
Obviously, you hear different English, and you know
Mm.
that there's sort of like, I would say, different rhythms to them,
Yeah.
right? Like
Mm.
the UK English has a different rhythm, the American
Mm.
English has a different rhythm. I mean, it's not so
Yeah.
different to say Kelantanese Malay is different than to say Johorian Malay, or to Terengganu Malay. All of us have sort of like our accents have different rhythms, and when I
Yeah.
first got here, it's about and again, you have this impression that, oh, what do I know about British English? Oh, the
Mm.
posh, upper class,
Mm.
Bridgerton sort of English. But
Mm.
of course, I lived in East London. That's the
Yeah.
heart of what we call multicultural London English, right? MLE, I
Mm.
think they call it, right? Where there's a lot of mixture of patois, Caribbean. There's a lot of
Yeah.
more, like, I would say, it's equivalent to AAVE, African American vernacular,
Mm-hmm.
in the London context, right? So there's a lot of that in the language that I have to interact with on a daily basis when I lived in East London, and
Mm.
that proved to be
Yeah.
challenging. Of course,
Mm.
I did still have a base of English. It's just that it's mind blowing how, would say, different it is to I'm used to in Malaysian English. Of course, they couldn't understand my Malaysian English as well. You would think that sometimes you would think that, oh, I don't have an accent, I don't have a
Mm.
slang. And then you come over
Mm.
to a different country and they tell you you speak English very, very differently. And I'm like, oh, really? And I didn't know that. Well, how do I? And then they point out all these things, and you're like, oh, yeah, yeah, I do that a lot. And you start to notice all these varieties of English that come about. So, yeah,
Mm.
that's kind of like the challenge that I face as a sort of like Malaysian coming to terms with, British English, or how to bit
Yeah.
straight. And I think a key example is that I had a discussion with my wife. Of course, just to note again is that, we did, me and my wife, we both did linguistics for our undergraduate studies. So we do tend to
Mm-hmm.
notice a bit more linguistic aspects of our language.
Mm.
So one of the things me and my wife talked about recently was how we have a tendency to add first at the end of our instructions, like, oh, we got to
Mm-hmm.
cross the road first. Now,
Mm.
I realize that that construction is not very common when we talk to, say, the locals or the Brits, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my theory is that we carry that over from Malay, and that we sort of borrow the sentence structure from Malay. Like in
Mm.
Malay, it's probably like an instruction would be like kena lintas jalan dulu. That
Mm-hmm.
dulu
Mm-hmm.
word is basically translated into first, so it becomes a bit like, we bring in. It's an example of us bringing in our experiences in different languages into our own spoken English. And that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine, but it's fascinating seeing all these like, yeah, so that's why my English is different. It's because
Mm.
of all the experiences I've had, right? So
Do
yeah.
you, yeah, do you feel a bit self-conscious when you speak to them, or are you a bit more careful, or you
Oh,
just go ahead
absolutely.
and you don't care?
I think in my first 2 years here, I was absolutely self-conscious about my English, and
Mm.
it's quite funny because back home you would think that I guess I would categorize myself as one of those who have a good grasp of English, right? It's
Yeah.
someone who's like, yeah, someone who, other my friends look to when we talk about communicating in English.
Yeah.
Coming here, it feels like my whole idea of what it is to be good at English is being challenged on a daily basis, is because it's
Mm.
like, how am I not understanding you and you're not understanding me?
Mm.
I speak
Mm.
English regardless. But again, I think it's just in general is this idea that we that's just part of the challenge of living abroad, living in a whole
Yeah.
different environment, is that you just have to get used to it. Different
Mm-mm.
worlds over there. I was self-conscious about it, but I also have this tendency to try to accommodate to other people's languages, try to like blend in as much as I can, because I don't really want to stand out. These days I think I'm a
Yeah.
lot more, say, confident in the fact that, you know what, I'm Malaysian, I should speak like a
Mm-mm.
Malaysian, regardless
Right. Right.
how funny it sounds to the Brits. But at the end of the day, I'm still Malaysian. But I try my
Oh,
best to sort of like adapt my English to fit more
yeah.
into how other people sound. I believe that, again, this is just me being, I would say, self-reflective, I guess. I don't know if it's true or not, but I
Mm-mm.
do think that I tend to sound more British English than I have if I compared to myself, when I first got here. And
Yeah.
yeah,
3 years before. Mm-hmm.
3 years before, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So that leads to me to my next question. What is it like
mm,
adapting to the environment there? And how's the family adapting? What does your wife think about living there?
mm, mm, um, again, I've noted how tough it was, but I do
Yeah.
partly realize that's probably because I don't know, I'm such a couch potato. I'm not much of a
Good word.
I'm not
Couch
much of an
potato.
outgoing person. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as much as I can speak on a podcast, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually a very, very reserved and shy person, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
stay at home a lot. So coming here, that is another aspect of the challenge, is that I have to sort of like put myself out there, get out a bit more, because you can't
Mm.
just be staying in your room in a whole different country. That's a lot of wasted
Yeah.
time, and a lot of
Yeah.
like I would say non-socializing can just make you go crazy in your room. So the first year for me was tough because obviously because of the my wife and my son actually they weren't here in my first year, because my wife had to basically continue working in Malaysia so that she could actually
Mm-mm.
apply for an unpaid leave for the final 2 years of my time here.
Yeah. And
So
she's an English teacher. Yeah.
yeah, she's an English teacher with IUM
Mm-mm.
actually. So yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, so she might have her own story of what the different challenges she's faced while
I
living in
might
the
have her
UK.
on as
Yeah,
my
yeah,
guest
yeah.
later.
I'll definitely like ask you to go ahead and do it. But the,
Yeah.
the idea is that they weren't here, so I was here alone. I was again more more I was more homesick because I was away from my
From your
at the
family.
time
Yeah.
at the time my 2-year-old child, which is like
Yeah.
that's very, very stressful in that sense. But yeah, it also meant
Mm.
that I went out of my way to sort of like challenge myself, get out there, try to
Mm.
reduce the sense of homesickness, go to all these events, interacted with a lot
Mhm.
of Malaysians, a lot of locals, joined a bunch of programs, and again that enriched my experience here.
Yeah.
It's challenging, but you got to can push yourself in that sense. And
Mm.
well, when my wife came here with my son in my second year, all right,
Mm-hmm.
the key thing is that we moved out of London. I made the choice to move out
Mm.
of London. Right, London
Okay.
is going through a bit of a rental crisis. Right,
Okay.
so people are being a bit pushed out because basically the rent, the rising cost of rent in London is basically
Mm-hmm.
they're basically pushing people out of London. So it
Oh,
happened to me as well. Yeah, so I had to move out of London. I now live in Luton. There's a joke
okay.
somewhere where Luton is a part of London, and the Brits here are
Mm-hmm.
laughing at this joke because because we have a London airport in Luton, but it's actually not part of
Oh.
London. Yeah, it's in
Hmm.
Luton, right? So and we moved out of London. And to be honest, I love it here in Luton. It's a lot more
Mm.
quieter. It's a lot more, I'd
Okay.
say, family friendly. I live beside a park. There's a playground. There's a huge playground that my son frequents because we were basically neighboring the park. And yeah,
Mm.
anytime I want to
So
get
he goes to
out, at the
school
very least,
in Luton?
yeah, he does. He does. And part of the reason why I like it as well, why I chose to live in Luton, is if I'm not mistaken, it is the third highest percentage Muslim demographic in the UK,
Mm.
just past
Mm, I
Birmingham,
see.
Bradford. So
All
halal
right.
food is practically everywhere. I've got a masjid
Yeah.
5 minutes away that I go for Friday prayers. So
That's,
it feels a
that's
bit
good.
more, how do you say, homely than say London.
Yeah.
London was a lot more challenging in that sense. So if anything, I sort of
Mm.
did it for myself. And
Yeah.
the thing is, Aisha, my wife, she's not
Mm-hmm.
entirely. She wasn't. She wasn't too pleased when she heard this initially because London is London. It's like one of the largest metropolis in the world. It's very
Yeah.
familiar. It's like so where is Luton? Where why are
Yeah.
we moving to Luton? Yeah. So
Yeah.
and
What is Luton known for?
yeah, yeah. Luton is funnily known for getting out of Luton, like the airport, the
Mm.
trains, the
Oh.
highways, which is quite
Okay.
funny. But after staying here for 2 years, we absolutely loved it, and I think I can
Ah.
say that for certain, as even for from Aisha's perspective. But there are a lot of things. It's not just moving away from London. There were a whole host of
Mm.
different challenges. Like we obviously had a car in Malaysia. When we came here, we
Mm-hmm.
had to start to learn to use the public transport. We walked
Mm.
everywhere. We basically go to send off Armin to school every day by walking. It's a 15-minute walk, but
Oh,
yeah, it's a
wow.
pleasant walk. But at first, it proved to be a challenge. But I think we've gotten
Yeah,
used to
because
it.
of the weather,
Yeah, the weather is
right?
absolutely
Mm.
it contributes but when it's not raining it's wonderful. If it rains, it's a bit of a slog to go about sending him to school.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, it's something we've gotten used to. Basically, we have
Mm.
basically started walking everywhere we go.
Yeah.
There's this anecdote. I met a friend in an event, a Malaysian event recently, and I we had this sort of like a gathering meeting with the Ministry of Education. So Aisha and Armin tagged along, but they went to a playground in London. It was about half an hour walk away from the venue of my event. Now I had a
Mm-hmm.
chat with a friend, and he's like, "Oh, that's not far. It's like it's probably like a 15-minute walk from here." And then we checked the maps, and it was like, "Oh, it's a 30-minute walk. That's quite a distance." But there's a sense like, yeah, 30 minutes it feels like a 15-minute walk for someone living in
Oh.
London, right? And
Mm.
45 minutes feels like a 30-minute walk, even though obviously that doesn't make sense. But it feels like 30-minute walk is not unachievable. It's something that can be done. And that's the sort of thing
Yeah.
that's going through my mind is that, oh, I've had a bit of a change in sort of mentality. It's like, a 15-minute walk to me is not it's not very far. To me, it feels like a 5-minute walk these
Mm.
days, as compared to I think when we're back in Malaysia, 15-minute walk feels like, oh my God, why are we walking there? It's going to take an hour. Right? We should go by car.
You're
So
right. And then we
that's
complain
something
about
I
the weather.
appreciate. Yeah.
Yeah. It was too hot,
Yeah,
and all of
yeah.
that. Oh, amazing.
But
Okay. So
so
you don't have you don't have a car. You haven't bought a car. Do you have a driver's license
yeah.
and all of that?
No,
Mm.
actually, yeah, because we
Hmm.
don't have a car to begin with, so we've just decided to
Right.
just do away with having a an international driving permit. And so the thing is, to
Mm.
get that, I have to actually go back to Malaysia to get myself registered and stuff like that, and then come
Yeah.
back here. So it's a whole process in
Mm.
itself. So I just decided not to be bothered with it.
All right.
And
Interesting.
yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Tell me about school. What school life is like for your son, and how
Um.
is he
Mhm.
picking up the English language? Was it like for him?
Uh, it was actually quite amazing. Things we learned in linguistics, things like critical period, how kids
Yeah.
are very malleable, very the brain is the plasticity of the brain, stuff like that, how they pick up
Yeah.
language so quickly, and to see it happening right in front of your
Mm.
eyes is actually magnificent. Right. So just a bit of context again. Armin came to basically the UK with not as much of a sentence in English, right?
Mm.
I mean, obviously, he watches TV from time to time. He catches a few words, but I absolutely know that he probably doesn't have a clue what these words mean. So when he came here, we were, again, we were justifiably worried, right? We realized, okay, we were having trouble adapting. What about, a child as small as 3 years old? How is he going to adapt? And again, he had it rough, right? For the first 6 weeks, I think we came to school and we realized that he did enjoy school, by the way, just to caveat that. He enjoyed it so much
Mm.
because the nursery over here, it's a lot more, I would say, holistic development, comprehensive
Mm.
development. You're not just here to learn your maths, your ABCs, and that's it. Right? You learn things about, songs, you learn how to socialize, you play with friends, you do a lot of science activities and all that. So he loved
Mm.
it, right? But obviously he had problem making friends because he couldn't communicate, right? He spoke
Mhm.
only in Malay, right? But it took him 6 weeks, right? And this was the
Mm.
thing, right? We saw it with our own eyes, is that he slowly, gradually started to speak in English, and by the
Mm.
week, he was fully in English. He was fully speaking English, right? One of our more, say, prouder moments was because we have the literal reports stuck onto the fridge of our apartment. There's the
Mhm.
first report came in that he had problems communicating, a language barrier, clearly understandable from the teacher's
Wow.
voice. Is that,
Okay.
yeah, that's what happens with immigrant children, right? They all have trouble adapting.
Mm.
And then we have the
Yeah.
second report that came in 6 weeks later, and he
Mm.
became, say, as the teacher wrote in the report, the most popular boy who everyone wants to play with, because basically communicating with everyone. And we were like, oh my god,
Amazing.
thank God. It was like, thank
So
God.
he was like a sponge. He was like only listening and observing, and then suddenly
Yeah,
all these things come out. The sentences,
yeah,
yeah, all of that. Amazing. Oh wow. Okay.
yeah.
So does he
I'm
speak
sure.
English
Oh,
now?
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. He basically speaks only English, and there's a worry on our part that, oh, is he gonna have
Yeah.
problems readapting in Malaysia? But I think that whatever we've seen from him here, he
Mhm.
is going to still be able to pick up Malay language as easily as he picked up English. I think it's part and parcel because if he uses language in context, right? So he uses English while playing, he
Mhm.
would pick it up a lot more easier. I think there's this thing where it's the environment that helps a lot with the language, right? You have to be
Yeah.
in the sense like, be able to use the English within an environment, right? Because I do see that as a case of, as for me as well, it's like, again, you might say that I have a good grasp of English, but for me to
Mhm.
actually develop, it's sort of like, a tangent towards British English. It's about
Mhm.
me having to go to all these programs, interacting with locals, going to events, and sort of having to practice using a bit of an British English slant of,
Mhm.
of my English, right? Using it
Yeah.
as a sort of within the right context allows me to develop that. And I'm sure it happens to him as well, as he uses
Mhm.
British English while playing with his friends at school. So yeah,
Oh.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
always been
Yeah.
the case, I see. Yeah.
Maybe you'd like to
And
share with us some interesting words or idioms or slang words or phrases while being in the UK. Maybe you could share with us some of these
you
words and phrases that you're not going to find in a
know,
textbook.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned just now that am I self-conscious about my English? I think yeah. I mean, if you're not, I think just by moving around to a different place, you're definitely going to be self-conscious about your language. But particularly because I took linguistics, I am extra
Mhm.
self-conscious about my language because I'm able to pinpoint all these things. What are these differences that I'm seeing in my language, right? So
Mhm.
I've noticed things like I've got new additions to my filler word vocabulary. Like I
Okay.
use a lot more yeah. It's a
Yeah,
very
like that.
yeah, it's a very British filler word.
Yeah.
Yeah, like yeah.
Mm-mm.
So it's like you're right, yeah. That's a very British way of saying it. And
And
instead of the
yeah.
word like the American way is to go like but the British
Mhm.
way is to use sort of, right?
Mm.
It's sort of like yeah. So I realized that oh wait, where did that
True.
happen? How did I add it sort of into my vocabulary? It's because I'm picking it up
True.
from my more local friends, my British friends, and they're like, oh yeah.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
mirror how they see it and how they
Yeah.
pronounce, how they use it English, and sort of like try to establish a base of solidarity with my sort of more
Exactly.
local friends. Yeah, and then that exactly that comes out. Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
form of respect as well,
yeah,
respecting them
yes,
and sounding like them. I think that's part of us
yeah.
being, adapting to the environment. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, 100%. Yeah,
and any
that
other,
comes
yeah,
out as
any,
well. There
interesting.
notice English phrases that I use such as getting it sorted, getting sorted. I'll
Hmm.
get this sorted
What's that
soon, right?
mean? Getting it
Yeah,
sorted, sorted
it's
out, is it?
getting it done, right? So, for
Get it
example,
sorted.
you need to send this report so that we can sort
Mm.
of work on your reimbursement, whatever. All right, I'll get it sorted next week. Is that all right? And like, yeah.
Mm.
And so there's
Right.
that whole sequence there. That's a lot of British English being used in it. But yeah, I'll get it sorted. Yeah, next week. Yeah,
Oh
all
gosh,
right.
I haven't heard
Yeah,
that in a while. Honestly, when I was in
yeah,
Manchester, now I'm recalling. I'm trying to recall it. Yeah, they do say sorted. They in Manchester
yeah,
without the
yeah. In
T, so it's
Manchester. Yeah.
sorted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do,
All right.
they do. And things like I say cheers instead of thanks. All right.
Mm.
It's like
Mm-mm.
I think I've heard somewhere that you would know if someone's not a local if they say
Mm.
thanks instead of cheers. So I'm like, oh,
Mm.
right. So because most people just say cheers, it's a lot more easier than saying thanks because I do think the British way of pronouncing thanks basically, they fix it on the pronunciation of the a lot more, so it's a lot more difficult. But cheers is very like cheers. Yeah, cheers,
Mm.
mate. Right. Yeah. So yeah,
Mate is another
and
one.
I
Mate.
use mate a lot. Yeah, mate. Yeah. And you could tell based on my vocabulary is that I've lived in a part of London where there's a lot more, let's say, again, modern London English, they call it, right?
Mm.
Multicultural London English, not modern, multicultural London
Yeah.
English. So there's a lot of these, like, mate, cheers, sorted, things like that.
Mm.
Yeah, 100%, yeah. So these are the
100%.
vocabulary I've
I like
yeah,
that.
100%. Yeah, these are the vocabulary I've picked up just by interacting with local British friends.
Really
And
teach my
again,
mm.
they've, I would say, made my vocabulary a lot more vibrant, a lot more different. And, I can like,
Mhm.
just churn out a bit of British English just to sound a bit different, I suppose. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Would
yeah,
you say it's,
if
yeah,
you
it's
you
different?
sorry,
Go on.
sorry.
Go ahead.
If you
Please
notice
continue.
as well, I have a bit of rounding on my vowels, a lot more than I used
Okay.
to, right? A lot
Tell us
more,
what is
lot
rounding
more.
of the vowels. Give me some words.
Like you would, um,
Like
although
no, is it O? Like that.
no, yeah,
Go,
no,
no,
do, go,
go.
yeah. I wouldn't usually say go. I mean, Malaysian we say go, and
Yeah.
like you should go. So that's like O and U together, and you will
Yes.
again pronounce it a lot more, as in a more British way. You round your
Yeah.
vowels a lot more.
Rounding the
So
vowels. Mm-hmm.
that comes out a lot more than I have than I have had experience before. And I do want to share
Mm.
this because I do feel like these are the more, I would say, common phrases that I've adapted into my language. But my favorite sort of phrase is "you all right,"
Mm.
and also generally "no worries" and "it's all right." Now, "you all right" has a bit of
Yeah.
a embarrassing connotation for me because
Oh
it's
gosh,
a
what
pretty
happened?
common, yeah. You're right. It's a question, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a question,
yeah.
right? So
Mm,
it's a very common question. In fact, it's not even a question actually. It's a
yeah.
greeting in UK.
Mm,
Yeah. So the thing is, it's like apa khabar in Malay, but I am
yeah.
not familiar with that. When I came here
Mm,
and the first person who said "you all right" to me, I gave them a long sob story about how homesick I was. My wife's not here. My son, my PhD is tough and all that, and the guys would be like, I didn't want to hear this. I was just,
yeah,
trying to be nice, saying, hey, good morning, apa khabar, and stuff
yeah,
like that. And
yeah.
suddenly someone comes up to me with their sob story. I totally forgot who I told it. That's probably because I was so embarrassed to who I told it to. So, but yeah, just an extension to that story is that you all right, although it's an embarrassing phrase for me, my favorite phrase that I've picked up in the British English language is basically, oh, it's all right, or no worries.
Mm-hmm.
So these two phrases, no worries, I would say, again, coming from someone who is sort of intimidated by London in general, by British English in general, hearing these two phrases, oh, no worries, oh, it's all right. Like, I first heard it on a bus, was taking the bus to go to campus, and then there was this old lady. She was again profusely apologizing. I'm not sure for what, to the bus
Mm-hmm.
driver, but the bus driver was being very, very non-fussed about it and very, very chill. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh no, 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 it's all right, love, it's all right, no worries, no
Mm,
worries." And hearing that again, even though it's not directed to me, the way it's spoken, the way it sounds so calming, so inviting, so welcoming. It felt
yeah.
that everything was all right at that point, even though it wasn't directed at me. Yeah,
Oh,
so I've
nice
been
to hear
using
that.
that as well. Yeah, yeah. So I've been using that as well. Like
Oh,
every time I meet
yeah.
people, I go like, "Hey, no worries." If someone's, I don't know, they do say sorry a lot here in the UK, so I would always go, "Hey,
Mm.
no worries." I'm like, "No worries. Oh, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, no worries." Hoping the
They are on
idea
the
is that
polite side. Yeah.
yeah, they're on the polite side. Hoping that if they feel, if they feel a bit like they've aggrieved me somehow, the way "no worries" and "it's all right" the phrases made me feel would have the same impact on them. They'd feel like, oh, okay, this isn't too bad of a place to stay. Everyone's a bit more welcoming just by these two phrases. I do want to point out that the driver sounded as if she's not from London. She sounded a bit northern, and I've
Mm,
gone north to Newcastle, to a bit more north, to to Scotland, and they do
yeah.
say "it's all right" and "no worries" a lot more than in London. So I do feel like, oh,
Mm,
maybe it's a northern people thing, but I love those two phrases, and I say that often just because of how much they have had an impact on me as someone who is sort of struggling as an immigrant, I would
yeah.
say.
Mm. Oh, yeah. It is comforting to hear, I think. It's
Mhm,
really interesting. It's nice to hear that. Oh, do you have any advice for our listeners who plan on studying abroad in an English speaking environment, but they
mhm,
just lack the confidence to do so? Maybe
mhm,
they need to take an exam. Do they have to prepare for it? Do you have
mhm.
any tips for that
Uh,
or
yeah,
advice?
I did have to take an exam, but just generally, I think if you are interested in furthering your studies in a sort of English speaking, English speaking country in any English speaking institution, the idea is
Mm,
that there's an assumption that you've probably already started to sort of look into it. You would
mm,
realize that it is a huge financial commitment. I mean, it's a huge
mm.
financial commitment anywhere you go, to be honest, to study abroad. So obviously, but assuming you get the opportunity, like I got a scholarship, so you have that opportunity, definitely go
Yeah.
for it, right? If you're unsure about it, I do feel like it is a once in a lifetime opportunity for you to, again, it's not all rosy. It's definitely not a vacation, especially if you're studying
Mm.
abroad. There's this mind perception that, oh no, studying abroad, there's this romanticization of what it is. It's very
Yeah.
challenging, but it's an experience that definitely helps you grow into a much more better version of you that you could probably have if you hadn't had that experience, right? But again,
Yeah.
to the specific point about the kind of tests or exams that I had to take, yeah, if you
Yeah.
are going to study in the UK, I you will be most likely be asked to basically take an English language test like IELTS
Hmm.
or TOEFL, right? So These two are the main, would say, major examinations when you're talking about, getting qualification to study in the UK. I do remember that the one advice I got is learn to basically answer the tests, and that was the advice I got. And I was like, oh, why is that? Because it's a hyperly structured test. That even if you have absolutely perfect English and you are able to answer, but if you don't answer in a certain way, you won't necessarily get the highest score possible. So you kind of have to
Mhm.
learn the tests rather than the. So it is a bit counterproductive in terms of, if you want to learn English as a communicative language, and you have to sort of like learn I would say, the structure of a test rather than learning English in
Mhm.
itself. But
Yeah.
it's also part and parcel because IELTS is the focus is on academic English, per se, and your ability to
Mm.
communicate within the sort of like, academic institutions and all that. So that's why they have these structures, right? And now, if you're looking for IELTS and TOEFL, generally tips and practice sets are widely available on the net.
Mhm.
It is a matter of making the effort to look for them, right? And again, your self initiative counts a lot in this, because you can definitely pay for a tuition teacher or anything, but
I
in
was just gonna
general,
ask you, did you
yeah,
pay
I
for a
did. I
tuition
did.
teacher and all of that?
Yeah, I didn't. I
You
just
didn't.
looked
I
up
don't think you
all
had
the
to
sources
anyway.
I can. Yeah, yeah. And the thing is that the structure is so well known that a lot of these different sort of coaches that are, again, widely available, they can sort of just come up with their own questions that sort of they are in line with the structure of IELTS or TOEFL themselves. So
Mhm.
it's down to your effort to look into them. Again, just to point out that just you could score incredibly in IELTS and TOEFL. By the way, you could get the full, the highest band possible, but it does not necessarily mean that you will be able to understand UK speakers. By the way,
Yeah.
right? so, but it does
Mm-mm.
allow you to apply to study in the UK, and it is
Mm.
usually a good indicator of whether you can have a conversation with a native speaker to begin with. Right? It is usually a good indicator. But at the end of the day, it's again a matter of learning the tests. And there's this sense that if your English isn't necessarily as good, you will still have problems with it. So absolutely, still practice your English. But when it comes to IELTS and TOEFL specifically, there is a specific way to go about it, because they still need you to answer within a certain way of answering. And I feel like that's always seems counterproductive, but I guess they are looking for specific things in how you answer those exams.
Yeah.
And
You
yeah,
can
I
tell
hope
me
that answers the
the
question.
band that you got later, right? Behind the
Oh,
scenes.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So band 9 is the highest, I think, yeah, for
Yeah,
IELTS.
yeah, it is.
So
Yeah.
I bet you got that. But never mind. You can tell me later. Okay.
Later, yeah.
So, all right. Let's move on to something fun and interesting. What
Oh, yeah,
was
yeah,
the
definitely.
highlight of your experience there? Anything that you want to share?
This I absolutely have to share this one. It just recently happened. I forgot the date, but was last week, was it? Yeah. So I don't know if anyone caught the news recently, but
Mm-hmm.
there were like, I don't know if people saw it, but there was a huge solar flare event happening in around, was it last week or was it 2 weeks ago? I'm not entirely too sure.
Okay.
And what happened was that, you know, solar flares are the reason why the northern lights or the aurora borealis appear on the, the north and south pole. But the solar flare was, a record breaking, would say, it was a huge one, that
Mm-hmm.
it basically meant that the northern lights is supposed and the aurora borealis actually showed up all across the UK.
Wow.
So yeah, so when the news came up on my feed, I was like, oh, okay, so there's a chance for me to actually, I get to see aurora. And I just
Mhm.
pushed my camera up just outside my apartment balcony, and there it was. It was
Mm.
I don't know. It was purple. The sky was magenta. It was streaking. There were green
Wow.
hues at the
Subhanallah.
bottom. It was,
Mm.
yeah, it was. I don't know how to say. I mean, like, oh, like I still can't get over it, to be honest. It's been like 2 weeks or so. I'm still thinking about it.
Mm.
Like, now, again,
What time was it?
the
What
thing,
time was it? Time.
it was around no, it was 12 a.m. in the morning, and it lasted about
Mm.
12:45. So because we were like me and Aisha, we were just
45
snapping
minutes.
pictures. Yeah, it was
Oh,
and we didn't know
wow.
how long it lasted. So we were just there
Okay.
snapping pictures as much as we can until it just went away. But it lasted 45 minutes, and we got so much pictures, and we're like, oh my god, this is incredible. This is something.
Yeah.
Again, I went. It's one of the things in my bucket list. It's actually one of the in the top of my bucket list. And one of the things that I
Hmm.
thought, if ever I'm going to die, I'm gonna have to go and see this natural wonder at least once in my lifetime. So when I came
Mm.
here, I thought that, oh, this is an opportunity for me to maybe catch it because I'm close to the north, I'm close to one of the Nordic countries where it always appears. So I did ask a friend about this, like, you
Yeah.
know, what does it cost to get to say Norway to basically go see the Northern Lights? And the thing is, he said that okay, it costs a lot because you're not just going to Norway, you're going to the northern part of Norway, some remote area. So they're gonna have to bring you via bus. They're gonna have to send you a chaperone you, provide you with
Mm.
food and camping equipment and all that, so you can like scope out the aurora. So it's gonna cost a lot of money. It's not just simply as flying to Norway and seeing it in Oslo. No, you're gonna go somewhere remote. Okay, so
Mm.
that seems like an impossibility. And he pointed out that it's actually not as common as you think. It's very rare. You mean you could plan all this and you could not see a single streak of aurora the entire time for your whole trip. So don't count
Mm.
on it. So the fact that the Northern Lights actually showed up on my balcony was the
Yeah, I
thing that
know. It's
blew
meant
my
to be.
mind. Yeah, yeah. Oh my
MashaAllah.
god. I was like, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
was like, bruch up like non-stop at
Yeah.
that moment
Subhanallah.
while snapping
Mm.
the pictures. So if anything, that proved to me is one of the experience that I'll probably never forget in my life. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Exactly.
This whole notion that from a small town of Luton, off the balcony of my apartment, I got to see the Northern Lights, and I can't get over it really.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, mashallah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been dazzling and beautiful indeed. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, if
So,
you
all
need
right.
pictures, by the
Yeah.
way, I mean, I'm happy to share how it looked like from all parts. But I'm sure if you Googled up Northern Lights the last week or so, you'd find everyone sharing pictures because everyone got a snap or everything, I suppose. But yeah, I'll be happy to share pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, please text me the pictures. Maybe I'll share your pictures on our blog if you don't mind. Maybe. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do. We'll do.
All right. So it sounds like your experience in England is nothing short of amazing, despite some, challenges here and there. But I believe
Mhm.
there's nothing that you can't cope with. I mean, you can handle the challenges, and it's all part of
Mhm.
your beautiful experience that you're going to remember for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
your
yeah,
son?
absolutely.
Oh my goodness!
Like just
Hi,
introducing. Oh,
this is Auntie
hello,
Auntie Azima.
Auntie Azimah.
Now he won't
It was
remember
once.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was too small. It was, yeah, but yeah,
Hi.
yeah.
Oh,
Hello.
so cute.
All right.
So cute.
I'm now 4.
He's now
You're
4.
4 years old now? Amazing. And
Yeah.
how's school?
How's school? Oh, sorry. I don't think he can hear
Do you
you.
like
I just
school?
realized.
Hmm.
How's school? Kiddo?
Right.
Hmm?
Who's
It's
your
all right.
favorite teacher? Who's your favorite teacher? What's her name
Mm,
or his name?
Misa.
Maisa. That's the name
Maisa.
of his teacher. Yeah.
I
And I
see.
like her.
You like her. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
So she's very
great.
fun. Yeah.
Oh, so cute.
Yeah. He's
Okay.
he's a bit shy, Dad. Yeah.
Thank you for
Can I
joining us. I'm
turn
going
it
to
on?
stay. You
Can
can
I
Yeah.
put
stay.
onto it?
Mm-hmm.
We have come to the end, Atta, but it's been a
Why?
pleasure, and I love listening to your stories. And
Why?
I mean, he's asking why are we ending? I just
why?
came. I just
Oh,
arrived
we
on
can
the
talk some more
scene.
after. We can talk some more,
Yeah.
okay? But I do have one last question. When are you planning to come back to Malaysia?
All right. Inshallah, I'll be back in Malaysia in August.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
really, my dad will be back if my dad finishes his work.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm looking to finish it within this month, hopefully, and that means that I can send a draft of my thesis and then get it examined. It will take
What?
approximately 3 months to get examined and all that, and
Papa,
hopefully I'll be
why?
back in August.
Inshallah. Amazing.
Inshallah. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So I wish you and your family the best, and I wish you the best in your studies, and hope that your wife and your son enjoy this experience of life there in the UK. With that, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you soon when you come back to Malaysia. Right?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Hoping to see you soon as well.
All right. So bye everybody. Bye listeners. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Bye.
wabarakatuh. Bye.
Bye.